Welcome to the Millionaire Race Podcast, where we are empowering you to maximize your potential to better your finances in order to help solve many of the socio-economic issues that affect the African American demographic today. I am your host, Toxi Oganyemi, and it is my pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks for listening. I believe you will benefit greatly for being here. As always, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe or follow the show so you can get alerts whenever a new episode goes live. Also, it helps our ratings so we can spread our message even further. Thank you in advance for doing that. If you have any questions or comments, remember you can reach us by emailing us at toxy@themillrace.com. That's Toxy, TOKSY, at THEMILRACE.com. As African Americans, we make up 12% of the U.S. population today. This per the census that was completed back in 2020. A percentage that has declined since the previous census. When I originally started looking into these numbers back in 2014, African Americans were said to make up 16% of the U.S. population at that time. Now, there are many reasons for the decline in the population percentage, but that's not the primary focus of our discussion today. The key point to note is, as I have said many times before, even though African Americans make up just 12% of the population, we still only control 2%, just 2% of the vast wealth that flows in and through the United States of America. That is a ridiculously low number, and it affects us in every single aspect of our socio-economic lives. With so little access to money, we have significantly reduced capacity to change the negative branding and labels that are put on African Americans today. In fact, most of the negative labels and prejudices have nothing to do with the color of one's skin, but rather they are the effects of poverty that, applied to any racial group would produce the same results. Statistically, African Americans are at the bottom of many of the positive social categories in the nation, like education, economic success, financial freedom, business ownership, while we are at the top of negative categories like incarceration, unemployment, drug use, fatherless children, and the list goes on. We have to rewrite this story. Our ancestors were forcibly brought to this nation, enslaved, stripped of their dignity, and most importantly, their ability to succeed in this country. Thankfully, slavery was abolished, and today we live in a new world where we can actually begin to fix the broken foundation of our community. Not by blaming anyone for what was and the effects of all that today, but rather by taking control of everything we have available to us and maximizing it. I contend that for us to matter in this country, we have to matter economically. Until then, we'll keep spinning around and going nowhere. There is a reason why after slavery was abolished, they didn't let the freed people learn how to read and write, own businesses, or land. They knew that economic strength for the African American people is the true freedom that would allow them to soar to heights even greater than any they could ever imagine. They held them back in every way possible, and the results, that's what we see today. Thankfully, however, the world has progressed to the point where some of the things done in the past cannot be done anymore, at least not directly. So we are put in a position where we can avail ourselves freely of things to gain us economic strength. That is, of course, if we take advantage of it. Of the 19 million African American households in the United States, only 350,000 of them can boast of a net worth of $1 million or more. Less than 2%. Isn't that amazing? I shared that with a gentleman just the other day, and he said, that's not possible. He said there are so many African Americans doing well. You can tell them by their nice houses, the nice cars they drive, and you can tell that this gentleman hasn't listened to our show. Because those of you who have know clearly well that there's only one way to define a millionaire. Not by the house you live in or the car you drive, but rather by you know it, right? That's right. Your net worth. Adding up all you own and subtracting all that you owe. The difference is your net worth, and if that is over $1 million, you're a millionaire. The fact that only 350,000 African American homes can boast of a net worth of $1 million or more should give us pause. That's such a low number. So why aren't more African American families millionaires, you ask? Well, there are many reasons, which we've talked about in previous episodes, but one of the main ones is simple. We carry too much debt. Actually, let me put it another way. It's because we have freely entered into slavery once again. The freedom that was so hard fought for has been easily thrown away as we have once again embraced slavery. Economic slavery. Even the Bible has something to say about this. Proverbs 22:7 says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." Yes, you heard that right. Slave to the lender. What exactly is the Lord telling us here? Even though it's not a sin to borrow money, you have to understand the relationship you are entering into when you borrow money. It's a slave-master relationship. I repeat, it's a slave-master relationship. And we all know too well how that kind of relationship goes. Not well for the slave, right? In any form or fashion. Brothers, sisters, we have to begin to break free of this slavery today. The opportunity cost is too great. What we give up is too much. Imagine what your net worth would be if you didn't have any debts attached to the things that you owe. Or still, just think about those interest payments that you make to the new masters, aka like MasterCard, all those monies that we should be investing in ourselves to grow our own financial future. We give them to these companies. We rob ourselves of the opportunity to invest and to grow and to become those net worth millionaires. I understand. If there's so little money flowing in our community, it is inevitable to think that we would need to borrow money in order to make ends meet. Well, not if we begin to change our mindsets today. All the things we talk about on this show start with us, but for some people, it will be fully realized in our children. But it's got to start with us, understanding that it is possible to become wealthy in this nation. It is possible to have a net worth of $1 million. But we can only do that if we get out of debt, increase our incomes, invest that income, use the resources that are around us to grow our wealth as individuals, so that collectively there'll be a groundswell where there'll be enough of us with enough resources to begin to change the African American experience in the United States today. I have a mortgage, and I have had other types of debt as well in the past. It was my understanding that that was the American way. Buy whatever you can and borrow for whatever you can as long as you can make the payments. Well, I have since learned that that is not God's way. In fact, His way is the exact opposite of the Proverbs 22 verse that I read before. His way is the blessing that you find in Deuteronomy 15 verse 6. And that says, "For the Lord your God will bless you, just as He promised you. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow." That's right. It's quite the opposite. We should be lending, not borrowing. We should be in the position of strength. That is God's way and His blessing. So I personally am currently actively paying off every single debt that I have so that I will be 100% debt free. Yes, I'm claiming my blessing. And guess what? With each dollar of debt that I pay off, my net worth increases. That's what I hope for you as well. But the reason I bring that up is all these things that we're doing is mainly not just for us, but also for the next generation. We want to set the next generation up so that they're able to carry this forward. Where we're talking about net worths of $1 million, hopefully they'll be talking about net worths of $10 million and upwards. My children, they're being raised to understand that they must live in God's blessings only. For them, I'm teaching them that debt is not an option. They have no reason to go into debt for anything, yes, including buying a house. That is how we must prepare the next generation. We need to become the millionaire race, all of us. And believe you me, if every African American household had a net worth of $1 million or more, the living in America experience would be totally different for African Americans, and we would matter without having to tell people that we do. Getting out of debt means living below our means and increasing our income. These are two things that we've talked about on previous episodes, and we'll do so a lot more in the future. But I've run out of time as we have to get to part 2 of our exciting interview with Daniel. Daniel is a fellow African American who has run our race and attained our goal of $1 million net worth. In the first part of his interview, he discussed growing up in St. Petersburg as an African American, going to college, and some of the challenges he faced there. We talked about affirmative action, getting his first job, and being intentional as African Americans in positions of authority. If you missed that interview, I would highly recommend you go back and listen to it. For the rest of us, after the break, we'll hear the conclusion of my interview with Daniel. So Daniel, as you graduated from college and you've had more opportunities, more access, financially it's become better. You've been able to run the millionaire race. Who taught you about finances, about money, and
life? Unfortunately, right? Look, my parents didn't talk about money. I never worried about it. Money wasn't something that I went to school, I played sports. If I wanted something, I said, Mom, Dad, can you give me something? Right. And so that was about it. Right. And, this scenario I told you, on the University of Florida campus, there are credit card companies out there that just sit out there and they're asking you as you walk by, sign up for one of these credit cards. And of course I did. My limit was a big $300. And at the time, I bought Snicker bars and Cheetos and socks and all the things that didn't quite realize that that was a loan. And I got to a place where I couldn't pay the monthly fee. It was $30 a month. I couldn't afford it. And I said, you know what? Forget about it. I'm going to be rich, right? Because I'm a black chemist. I'm going to be a chemist one day, right? When I finish. So I finished school back in St. Pete. And now I can start to pay, I can start to pay this thing off. And I go to buy a car, I'm making pretty good money. And they laughed me out of the shop. They laughed me out of the shop because my credit score was absolutely dismal. Never had a discussion with my parents about credit. Don't remember any schooling about finances. And so here I am. Look, I think I could have been making 50, 30,000, I don't know, some number, but I'm enough to buy a car. I can, and they wouldn't sell it to me. And that was my first realization, right, of what credit means and how to manage money and the impact that credit has on your life. The thing with credit, right, is if you and I can buy the same car, and let's just say that car is $15,000. Well, with poor credit, that car cost you $28,000. with great credit, that car cost you $16,000 because of interest. My first car was 30% interest. And so as we talk about running the millionaire race, right, not knowing the impact that $300 credit card was going to have on my life, imagine not having to do that. And so now here I am paying 30% interest rate on a used car. Imagine what I could have done with those dollars, right? And so my thoughts on finances are, unfortunately, I learned it through life, ignorance, and would have loved to have had some guidance along the way, right, on making some better choices. But that's where I'm at, and I worked through that. When I moved to Chicago, I had a saying, like I had to pay all my bills and I had to live with what was left. And I learned to do that. Got myself out of the credit problems, right? And again, discipline at this point, right? Everything's going to be paid off. I'm not going in the debt, but those were life lessons that I had wished I never had to learn it that way. It's a painful way. It's like when you tell your kids, don't touch the stove because it's hot. There are some kids that have to touch the stove because they have to experience it. Yeah. That's a hard life. Yeah. And then those that don't can learn from others, right, tend to have a better life.
Yeah. But in your case, you weren't told not to touch the stove. You just
I was totally ignorant. Right.
Why do you think that is? How old were you at this point? You must have been in your mid to late 20s or something?
Yeah, early 20s. Early 20s.
Yeah.
Why I think that, I think as African-American families, right, we don't talk about money in that sense. One, not because I don't believe my parents had credit cards, right? But it wasn't a family discussion. Many times, at least I think for my parents, was that's what they want you to do, to not have to think about money. They want, and so I think that's a great thing. And when you're not worrying about, are we going to eat today? Like my parents, my dad had 14 brothers and sisters. My mom had 12 brothers and sisters, right? And, he was hoping he didn't get the back of the chicken, when he came home. And so I think for them it was, they didn't want their kids to have to worry about money. And so you didn't talk about it. Mistake in some sense. But I do think that was part of the reason that those weren't discussions that we had, because those aren't fun discussions all the time.
So do you have those discussions with your kids now?
I absolutely do, right? And so the story that I just told you, I share that with them all the time. We talk about money, and we talk about there's the essence of money. What do you do with money? You save it, you share it, you spend it. Those are the three things. And so anytime you get some money, you have to think about, how am I going to parse that out? So if you get a check, right? Look, I got to put some away for savings for the rainy day or 401k. I want to share it, right? Whether it's with my church or whether it's with somebody in need, there's a certain part you share. And then, of course, we spend it, right? And so knowing the right balances to that, those are the type of conversations we're having today already. Credit cards, not quite there yet, although the kids do have debit cards and stuff now. And so my wife has opened up credit cards for them. We actually do, we invest, right? And so we've gotten money for them. They can go in and pick and choose certain companies, and we look at that. Yeah. So my experiences that I've had is that, no, we are going to have those discussions because it's going to pay off later, right? And so those are the type of discussions we're having in our house.
What role does faith play in your life and your journey?
It absolutely plays a big part. Grew up in a Christian household. Parents are big parts of the church. But, it's interesting. When I was growing up, I'd go to church and my parents would stay home. And so that was because my grandmother was going to church, and I enjoyed it. Look, I'm a believer in faith. I love spiritual music. I play it around my kids, right? We attend church, not as often as I would like to, that we've been doing lately. We should do a little bit more. But I think you have to expose kids to faith. And the reason being is life brings you challenges. I'm a believer that as life brings you challenges, the one thing about at least the Christian faith that I believe in is that it's going to get better. And the idea that whatever life brings you, there's a brighter day tomorrow, and that you can get through it. And, he didn't place you in a place of something that you can't manage. Right. And so I live by that. Right. It's a bad day. Look, I'm going to go and sing a spiritual or something that's going to try to bring me up. And so faith is an important piece of our household. And we think that, or at least I believe it's a way of life. Right. So hope that's helpful.
Awesome. Very, very helpful. Thank you. All right. So speaking about the African American experience today, what do you think about it?
Yeah. So it's very complex. Look, I grew up in a middle class household, but we talked about those 13 and 14 brothers and sisters. Not everybody was so fortunate. Look, I think today there's an opportunity for all of us. My dad would always say, you don't know racism like I know racism, because it's different. What was right in front of them, right, is not the same today. We live in a neighborhood today. Look, my kids' friends are so many different nationalities, right? It's weird to me because that's just not how I grew up, black and white. And they've got quite a few different nationalities as friends. But where we are today, when you think about our educational levels and healthcare and all those things, unfortunately, history has played a big part in that. But then how do we change it, right, is the big question, right? And one, I think education is an important part. We have to value education. The other is, I've traveled around the world, is not knowing how good we have it already today. And, I tease my friends, look, we're concerned that we don't have the big screen TV, right? And so that's why we're angry with the man, right? Because they can buy all these things and I don't have one. And when I travel across the world, in some places where people are still washing their clothes in the streams, where they have dirt floors, I said, that same TV you're arguing with, they put that on, that'd be their roof. And that's just as big as their house is. But that's how so I think that there's a part of the African American experience that doesn't know how well we have it, but that's not to say that we shouldn't have it better either. Yeah. Right. I want to make sure that's clear. Yeah. Right. And, as we see some of these other racial or races start to really pass us by, I think in many cases there's two things to that. One is people, again, coming from a place that's really bad, and they're seeing how the opportunities are that they have here that they didn't have elsewhere. Yeah. That's one thing. The other part is with some of the immigration, they're bringing people in that already have it, right? And so we have to be clear with that. Like, everybody's not coming on the border, right, and crossing over Mexico, right, and then they're now somehow successful. There is a government part of that are bringing people in that already have some levels of success, mostly because they already have an education. They already have some of these things, and that's the value that the government is saying we're bringing folks over. Yeah. And so as an African American, our plight, right, from that perspective has to now be, we've got to compete in the things that matter. And so that's education. That is some of our morals, things that we have to do. We've got to kind of change that, and we've got to have a belief that we can compete. Yeah. But unfortunately, we've got some history where we've done all the right things. There's some uncle, there's some aunt or some cousin, right, that went to college and did everything right. And unfortunately, right, they ran into some of those obstacles, and those obstacles in 1980, 1970s, right, those obstacles really did stop folks. Yeah. And so you've got some of that. People remember those things. And you say, then why should I? Why should I compete? Why should I do these things, right? And so there's a little bit of mindset I think that we've got to think about as an African American community. But I do think that education, right, has to be a focal point. What education does for you, right, is allows you to do the things you want to do. I'd say to my kids all the time, that, look, if everybody can do the job, then that job doesn't pay a lot. What does that mean, right? And so, again, if, everybody can clean a bathroom, right, guess how much those people make? They don't make a lot. But can you determine whether or not you've got the right amount of potency in a drug that's going to save lives or not? Yeah. Well, not many people can do that. That pays a little bit more. And so the reason that, I stress education, right, is so that you can get to some of those roles in jobs that the masses can't do, right? And that allows you access to more dollars, right? And not only that, it allows you to choose what you want to do the rest of your life instead of falling into something, right? And so we've got to do better with that as a race. Not sure how we're going to do that yet, right? But we've got to focus on that. Yeah.
So one of the main solution that, I propose on this show is for every African American family to have a net worth of $1 million. Aspire to that, not because money is everything, but the key word, what you said, was access, to give you access to go to school without worrying about the funds, to give you access to live where you want to live, to give you access to meet people and all these kind of things. How realistic do you think is the millionaire race?
Well, I think it's a concept. And so the concept makes it realistic. Yeah, as we talk about access, that is some of the reasons why we have fallen behind. I'll give an example. I was sitting with some colleagues, and she's talking about her kid that she wants to be in a certain middle school, and there's some testing that they need to do, and et cetera, right? And she says, you know what? I'm going to go and send him to a tutor, and I'm going to pay for that. Well, that's called access. One, you had access of dollars to be able to do it. Then you had access to know the person that could train them up, right? Well, look, when I grew up, that access didn't exist. My parents couldn't do my math past 6th grade. No one in my church could do it. They certainly didn't have the dollars, right, to send me someplace. Not that that person is smarter than me, but they had access to certain things that we didn't have. And so that gets in the way from an African-American perspective. And when you start to really peel the onion, it mostly becomes wealth. Those that have are in the circles of others that have the wealth. They're in the circles of others that have the know-how. They're in the circle of the people that I like, so I hire. And so our ability to get access is really, I believe, kind of the cornerstone of our growth. Look, if my kids can't get something, they're not making certain grades, I won't pay for it. They're going to go to tutoring, right? And I can afford it. I've been blessed to do that, but not all of us have that ability, right? And so I think it's one of the bigger issues that we face as an African American race is access.
Yeah. All right. So I ask all my guests this question. If anyone listening would like to do what you do, how would they go about it?
Sure. So one, look, you got to have a degree, right? That's important to do, to have, and not just chemistry, right? It's in the science field. You could have been an engineer, a physicist, any of those things. Of course, that's a rigorous course load and type of thing. So one, you'd have to be focused on that. Secondly, look, my growth is because I didn't have a problem moving. I took risk. I'll leave this job for another job, right? And I have a belief, it really wasn't a belief, it's just what happens, is, look, someone will pay me 20 to 30% more than if I stay at this job. If I stay at the job, I get a 3% raise this year, maybe a 5% another year. And if I get a promotion, they might give me 6% more. And so the speed at which it takes you to hit a certain amount of dollars by staying at one company can be years where I can pick that up if I just leave and go to another place and take it. But it's a risk, right? I don't know those folks. Maybe I really enjoy the people I'm working with and some of those things. But one, if you want to do it quickly, I tell people, one, don't be afraid to take risk and change jobs. Someone will pay for your experience and they'll pay a premium for it. So that was helpful to me, which was to move around. Secondly, I had a lot of mentors and I've had folks that have helped me, right? And so when we talk about, I've had my first management job, I was hired by an African-American man. He believed in me and gave me a shot. Find mentors. Don't be afraid to show up as yourself, right? There was a saying I remember growing up where, grandma said, don't you tell them anything about your personal life. Well, then you're kind of weird. People want to get to know you. And so I think that's one thing I always share is come as yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you have to tell everything about, you don't have to tell them about Uncle Johnny and what he does, right? And some of those things. But I think it's important to come as you are. It's important to take risk. And you know what? It's okay to outwork people, right? And those are things that I tell people of how I became successful, or some of the things that I think were important in my success, right? Was I didn't mind moving. I didn't mind integrating and sharing and being a part of something. And then I could not do that when I'm at home, but while I'm here, right, I can do those things too. And then you have to outwork folks.
Thank you so much, Daniel. You've given us so much insight today. Any last thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Sure. First, thanks for allowing me to come on and share my thoughts. I think that this journey that you are attempting to move us on is an important one. I think sharing, and as we talk about mentors and things, but sharing experiences are extremely important. This is how you learn. And so, look, I hope that I was able to share some experiences that other people can take a hold of and find themselves being in prosperous situations. And your definition of prosperous is all yours. But that hopefully there are some nuggets that someone can take in for their own growth.
That concludes our interview with Daniel. That's a good one. And I hope you were able to pick out some certain aspects of the interview that apply directly to you. Please join us next week for another exciting episode. Till then, God bless you, and I'll see you next time.